So, this is a video that I watched on TikTok and it truly disgusted me. I want you to see.
No parent should have to fight this hard to care for their child, to hold their child, and to comfort their child. As you saw, my son was completely robbed of life. And to justify that, we have been criminalized.
The story you're about to hear is one of the most disgusting, depraved, horrific things I have ever heard in my entire life. And I'm not saying that to warn you so that you'll swipe past this video. I'm saying that to warn you because everyone needs to see this video. Everyone needs to hear this story, but unfortunately, once you do, you will never be the same human being again. This is Decca Haji and her children, Muhammad, Manal, and her identical twins, Masab and Mahad. Now you're probably thinking, identical twins, Peyton, those children do not look alike at all, and here's a gold star for you, save that until later, I promise it's going to be important. No, these identical twins do not look identical at all, but not by accident. See, he wasn't born this way. This wasn't the life that Mahad was supposed to have. Mahad's current condition, the one that he's stuck in for the rest of his life, is the result of years of torture, medical malpractice, and systematic separation from his family by multiple institutions who are all trying to cover up the same lies. And while they've been torturing Mahad at the hospital, they've been torturing his family back home by relentlessly harassing them, lying about them, investigating them, and even literally criminalizing them. The people who have only been trying to save Mahad's life since the day that he was born. Every horrific thing these institutions have put this child and this family through these last 4 years has been intentional to cover up lie after lie after lie. But to give you the full story, we need to go back 4.5 years ago, when Decca Haji was pregnant.
I was an obsession with my pregnancy from the beginning. They wanted to keep a close eye on me, and I would go into the hospital, Mount Carmel St. Anne, fetal and maternal medicine, at least 2 times a week. A lot of these examinations I did not want to take place. I understood the nature of these examinations. I am a registered nurse, and I understood the risk that all of these invasive internal monitoring every week, multiple times a week could do. During one of the visits that they wanted me to come to, the technician pushed the probe deeper than she should, and I had bleeding. But I was told that it was no problem, and I was sent home. And I do believe that was the first injury that my son sustained. January 25th, I went into spontaneous labor, and I was admitted into the hospital, Mount Carmel St. Anne. I was put under, and I received what is called the regional epidural, which is only from my waist down. So I was awake and lucid and alert. Once they cut me open, I was eagerly waiting for my babies to cry, 2 healthy babies. As soon as they cut me open and they pulled the first baby out, which is Mahad, right away the air in the room was very, very tight. The doctors and the nurses were looking at each other. I am able to see above the drape. You can see people's facial reactions. I just could not see below. As soon as they looked at each other, and when the child cried a very high-pitched cry, as if someone pinched the baby, and he's never cried again. That pause was so long. It was so uncomfortably long, and they moved on without providing me an answer. And then they pulled the second baby, and he was crying and throwing his hands and feet up. In the condition that they were in, it was very visible that baby A was not normal.
Quick outfit change because my dog ruined my shirt. Let's recap to help you get your bearings, because if you think what you just heard was bad, that was nothing. It's going to get biblically worse. So Mount Carmel St. Anne's is making Decca come in 2 times a week while she's pregnant with twins, which she felt was excessive. She ends up being right. Someone improperly sends a fucking metal probe up inside of her and causes her to start bleeding. And then this hospital tells this bleeding pregnant woman everything's fine. Eventually, she has an emergency C-section at the same hospital. When they remove her first child, Mahad, the room goes silent. The only noises heard are from medical utensils slamming against a tray and Mahad letting out one loud screech. She's asking what's wrong. They're not answering her. They remove her second child. They hand both of her children to her, and this is what her identical twins looked like. As you can see, there is a visible vein protruding from Mahad's head that was not present with his brother. And keep in mind, in person, this was much more visible than it clearly is here. So Mahad wasn't moving like his brother. He wasn't crying like his brother. He had a visibly protruding forehead vein, unlike his brother. And Decca is told everything's fine, and they discharge her and her children against her wishes 5 days later. Then, 8 weeks later, after 2 months of repeated hospital visits and constantly trying and failing to convince the hospital that her child was not okay and needed to be properly treated, treated, Decca's worst fears came true. And from this point on, I cannot stress enough that everything you're about to hear and see is fucking vile. So be prepared.
One night as he was getting fed by his father, he regurgitated, and instead of formula, he regurgitated blood. These were some of the concerns that I was reporting to his primary care provider. All of these visits, I reiterated that Mahad and his twin were not the same. Every time we were feeding him, it felt like he was going to aspirate. I was told that it was possibly because a digestive issue. They changed their formula 3 times in those 3 visits that they had with the primary. 8 weeks later, my worst nightmare came true. What I was fearing happened. As Mahad was feeding, he aspirated and regurgitated. Blood came out from his mouth and nose. That night, he was rushed to Nationwide Children's Hospital. Scans were done, and that's when it revealed that a vein in the left lobe of his brain got disrupted, and the entire 8 weeks we had him home, he was slowly bleeding in his head.
This night is everything. Up until now, I'm guessing you've been assuming that Mahad's current condition is a result of his birth injury and thus the fault of Mount Carmel St. Anne. No. Mount Carmel is only one guilty party, and what they did to Decca and Mahad is going to look childish compared to the others. The truly evil actions that have been committed against them have been committed by Nationwide Children's Hospital and CPS. That night, almost 4 years ago, when Mahad's father, Saeed, rushed him to Nationwide Children's Hospital, he had no idea that that would be the night Mahad Muhammad would never come back from. 6 days in, within a week, doctors deliberately ignored instructions necessary to relieve Mahad's brain fluid and pressure, which resulted in his brain fluid tripling. This led to Mahad being placed in a permanent vegetative state. And unfortunately, it doesn't stop there, not by a long shot. Over the last 4 years, Nationwide Children's Hospital has tortured this child. That is a definable fact. There is no other way to describe it. Here's just some of the injuries that Nationwide Children's has inflicted on this child who is again in a permanent vegetative state.
He's had both of his femurs fractured. These are the biggest bones in our body. He's had his radius dislocated. He's had his jaw dislocated. Number of bruising. They said that he was ready to be extubated from the ventilator machine. I knew he was not ready. Before someone is extubated from a ventilator, they have to prove they can breathe on their own. But they wanted to still extubate him, which they did extubate him, and he epically fell. He was breathing at a rate of 7 breaths per minute. He was turning purple. I remember they kept saying that they wanted him to fly, and I kept saying that he needed wings to fly, and they were not providing him with the wings. And they stood there and watched him suffer for nearly 8 hours before they finally said, okay, fine, we will intubate him again. Mind you, they just extubated him less than 7-8 hours ago. His airway's inflamed. He has a compromised airway, difficult intubation. There are machines that are designated for people with difficult airways that are hard to intubate. The machine was sitting right at the doorway, but they chose not to use the machine, but rather give 5 residents a chance each to see if they can intubate him. They all 5 failed and could not intubate him. This came at a cost of Mahad never eating again. This shattered his entire upper airway. He will never swallow again. They have not suffered any repercussions. In fact, they gained a manicate, a non-verbal life manicate. He cannot tell them to stop. He cannot say something is hurting, something is burning. He goes under medical procedures that an adult would not go under without anesthesia, and they would say because he doesn't appear to be in pain. But there is no way for him to tell them that he's in pain. Everything that happens under their care is classified as accidental with his care. All of these injuries that Mahad sustained all happened under their care. And we went through investigations for every single one of them. After they are determined that they are not our fault, they will be classified as accidental with his care.
At this point, you've probably got a couple of questions. Chief among them, why the fuck is this child still at this hospital? That night when Saeed rushed Mahad to Nationwide Children's Hospital, they immediately called CPS and placed Mahad under an alias, trying to profile Saeed as an abuser. Yeah, Decca and Saeed didn't get to stay in the hospital with their son that night because they got rushed back to their house by police and CPS, who did warrantless searches of their house and also subjected all 3 of their children to rigorous testings at the hospital to make sure they weren't abusers. Obviously, these tests proved that these children weren't being abused, so obviously they got to keep their children, but what about Mahad? He's still at the hospital. Don't worry, his tests came back and they showed that he actually had chronic brain bleed, which is consistent with his birth injury, so that makes sense, except 2 weeks later. Yeah, when Mahad first got to the hospital, Nationwide Children's needed his birthing records from Mount Carmel St. Anne's, so they sent out for them. Then a couple days later, they got back the results of the tests. It's chronic brain bleed. Then, 2 weeks later, Mount Carmel St. Anne's sent over his birthing records. They switched his test results from chronic to acute. Somebody actually did do this. That's what we're saying now. They then gave those false results to CPS, pointed at Saeed, and said he's the one that had to have done it, and then police and CPS investigate Saeed. So while they were dealing with Saeed possibly going to prison for a crime he didn't commit, they were also dealing with the hospital constantly trying to keep Decca out by any means necessary and not trying to give her rights to her child. As they're trying to deal with this hospital stealing their child from them, they're also getting legal representation for Saeed's felony. Except, oops, the lawyers they hired actually were court appointed. They didn't know that. They weren't informed of that. They ended up spending $30,000 on these lawyers who extended their trial for 2.5 years. Then in December of 2024, the charges were mysteriously dropped. Saeed's good. There's no more charges. We're fine, right? No! The lawyer and CPS did not inform the courts of this, so they went on with the trial anyway, and the lawyer convinced Saeed to take a deal where he would just admit guilt. She even specifically made sure that Saeed was alone for their meeting because he's incredibly bilingual. He's usually not alone because he doesn't understand English very well. So this lawyer stole $30,000 from them and got Saeed to admit to a crime that not only did he not commit, but he wasn't even being charged for. So right now they are trying their hardest to get a felony off of his record for a crime that he never committed because they have a court hearing in a month and a half, and it's their last shot to get their child back from these evil people before they fucking kill him.
We have realized that silence protects injustice. What Mahad endured is injustice. We want people to know that despite all of these inhumane practices that have taken place with our family, that we are humans. Mahad is a human. He has a heart. He feels pain. He belongs with his family that loves him, that has fought for him from the moment that he was born and will never give up on him. We are also seeking restitution from all of the agencies that are involved. What happened to our child and the injuries that he sustained were not by faith. He was not born with these injuries. They were inflicted onto him, and now he has no quality of life. The amount of federal and state laws that have been broken in the process of covering up the truth and what actually happened to our child is unheard of. It implicates too many people in powerful places. We feel completely defeated. We are up against a system that is systematically designed against us. I want anyone that's watching me, especially the families that look like me, to know that they can speak their truth, that they do not have to be afraid. No parent should have to fight this hard to hold on to their child, to care for their child, to hold their child, and to comfort their child. As you saw my son, he needs the presence of his mother and his father and his brothers and sisters. He was completely robbed of life. And to justify that, we have been criminalized in all the court systems. Seems like our entire life has came down to us just being in the survival mode. Constant fear and terror we live under. We have been traumatized, completely traumatized by this process. It is by far the most devastating and most painful experience of my life. We just wanted to be left alone. We just wanted to hang on to our son. We want transparency. We want restitution for what happened to our son. And we want all key stakeholders to be investigated independently so the truth can be told. Our constitutional, civil, and parental rights have been violated. I have been completely stripped of my parental rights. Our child belongs to us.
The only good thing about this horrific situation is that you can help. There are 2 petitions in my bio. We need as many signatures as possible. There's also Decca's GoFundMe for her legal defense. She needs as many donations as possible. And the last thing you can do is share the hell out of this video. Copy a link, do a bunch of different stuff. I mean, this is the most horrific shit ever. Decca is an incredible person. What her family is going through is like, they need help.